Welcome to the Turning Lemons into Lemonade podcast. Each week, your host, Amy Mewborn, business strategist and advisor, will bring you the stories of how successful women entrepreneurs turn their tragedies into triumphs to create the businesses that are changing the world today. And now, your host, Amy Mewborn.
Welcome to Turning Lemons into Lemonade. Today's guest is Jade Duggan. Growing up in a family of wellness and organizational development pioneers, Jade was the original guinea pig for the foundations of what later became the first graduate degree program in transformative leadership and social change in the U.S. Using these skills from the arenas of ontology, biology, and cognition, alongside her clinical acupuncture practice, gives her a particularly practical and physiological grounded, skills-based approach to culture and leadership design. Jade's favorite work is in the arena of empowering more effective living and leadership through listening to the body. Her unique skill is in teaching individuals and groups to notice and activate their physiology towards leadership, thus naturally away from stuckness or stress patterns. Jade has worked with leaders and groups from Pepsi, FINRA, NSA, Accenture, Lockheed Martin, and the FDA, amongst others, in the arenas of leadership, communication, mindfulness, safety, and corporate culture development. Welcome, Jade. Welcome, Jade. I am so thrilled that you are my interview today. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in your business.
Hi, Amy. I'm so glad to be here with you, having some fun today, too. So my business, I started off as an acupuncturist 13 years ago in this version of my professional life. Yeah. So I had a small private practice, and then my parents, who were running a big acupuncture and herbal medicine and transformative leadership school, that organization got a little unwieldy. There's a whole story in there, but I knew they were going to have to leave, and I was practicing in the faculty practice there, and I could see the writing on the wall. What they envisioned for their lives, what we were really teaching, what really mattered to us wasn't really going to be happening in that institution for very much longer. Mm-hmm. So I opened a wellness center, 10 treatment rooms, big, 600 square feet yoga studio with bamboo floors, designed the whole thing from scratch. It was a slab of concrete. It was beautiful. So I designed it as a place for my parents really to continue to teach what I knew was important to them and to the people that came to them. And so we had courses there, we had acupuncture, and we had massages, we had a bunch of stuff. There's a wellness center, beautiful front desk, staff member who'd been running our practices for a long time. So, and that was lovely. So that's how I started that. And then, so also during that time, I found out that, so we started some practice because I also knew that there were a lot of acupuncturists I couldn't necessarily refer people to start a program to teach them some of the really core skills that were important. Mm-hmm. And then I got hired by one of our students to do some work with her organization. And I'd already been doing some work inside of organizations, except for that this was a bigger scope and it was a more custom design. And I was working with a lot more people who didn't really have a background of understanding culture design or why they should care about employee happiness right? It was a big, major organization. And so I had to strip everything out and get all the airy-fairy, woo stuff. I had to take it all out so that I could really just talk to people who, running plants, right? These big blue collar plants. And so that was a stunning success. And what I realized is I had to also teach people better that way. Mm-hmm. So I was running that program, and I continued to do that and ended up working more and more with organizations through those programs over the past 6 or 7 years now. I've been doing that. But a little over a year ago, and I was doing this with my father, who I sort of took the stuff that they'd been teaching, I took what stuff my mom had been teaching, and really sort of crystallized it and made it really simple. And so my dad and I were teaching this course 2 days a month with students who loved us. It was really intimate. And, sometimes we'll joke that it's not a Duggan day until somebody's crying, like in a good way, like in a breakthrough kind of way, which is kind of scary for organizations. I don't tell them that I said that. But then my dad suddenly, he ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. He'd done an elective hernia surgery, and otherwise had been in amazing health, right? Yeah. He was the guy that we all thought was going to live to be 100. And he was 75, so he was not, a spring chicken. Mm-hmm. We knew it would happen at some point. Almost overnight, I went from running an organization that was, $500,000-$600,000 a year, not a ton of profit in it. It was still, it was still kind of narrow margins. Mm-hmm. But my dad and I were teaching a fair number of the courses. My mom and my stepmom were practicing acupuncture with me, and my dad ended up in the hospital and needed round-the-clock care. He was intubated. We almost lost him immediately when he first went into the hospital. He'd never been in the hospital my whole life. Like when I got the call, and he'd never, I'm 40 years old. And he'd never been in the hospital. And so we just took care of him, and we just decided we took shifts. I made the schedules. We took shifts, which was great. Except for that, our students, we put our students on hold. We canceled some of our bigger workshops, which were a big moneymaker for us. And over the next, he was in the hospital for about a month before he actually died, which was actually beautiful, just to say, I know we're talking about my business, but
no.
But you know what? One of the things that was really beautiful about it was that all of the skills that we teach, that we were teaching together, were really about how to live well, how to die well, even how to just stay graceful in the space of true suffering. And so I learned so much, when I talk about the skill sets that I was teaching with him, I leveled up my own skill sets immensely, just exponentially, in having to just stay present with myself, present with him, present with all of the medical system, which from our holistic background, we knew that, medicine is and medically induced diseases are like a third leading cause of death in the US. Yeah. Right. So there was also that tension. I had to move through all of those spaces and get peaceful over and over and over again. And it was great to be by his side during that time and to support him in that way. He'd never asked anybody for help. He was one of those people who he created big waves of social change wherever he went, but never asked for much. And so he finally was able to take that in from us, which was great. But he died a month later, and I had a business that had lost about $120,000 worth of income. Oh. And
and you had a big space, so it wasn't like all of a sudden the income just dried up. You really had kind of the thing that as entrepreneurs we fear the most, big overhead.
So I had not including service provider payments, I had about $17,000 worth of overhead every month. And that doesn't even include the extra spaces. So when we would do a big workshop, I would rent out a bigger hall, so we'd have 65 people in those workshops. And so I had, so I wasn't making any money because I wasn't practicing. I mean, it was a little bit, right? We were taking shifts, but the clinic just wasn't making the kind of money. And he and I were bringing a lot of the money around the courses we were teaching, which we just put on hold. And so, the stuff to pay the taxes, to pay our desk staff, to pay our, rent, the whole thing. And the loans that we had for various things that we purchased. And so anyway, the whole thing was just sort of, it was shocking. It was really shocking because I knew it was happening. I realized I hadn't prepared well, right? That's the other thing is I think as a business owner, you don't think about, I guess experienced business owners do think about these things because now I won't have a business where there's somebody inside of it that I'm dependent on who doesn't have insurance. Like I didn't insure him as a key player.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is funny to think about, but, um, and, or myself for that matter, right. To be able to take time out and have that kind of, go on
Mhm.
without me. And what's really interesting about it is that now it's one of the reasons in this new iteration. Do you want me to tell you the whole thing about how we got from there to here?
Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's do that.
Because I was going to say, one of the things that's like that, the thing that shows up for me now is, now I'm aware, I'm the only person. So he died and left me on this planet as the only other person who really can teach those skills effectively and quickly, and in a way that, an organization or an individual can take it, learn it, iterate over and over again. And so I'm realizing now, I don't want to leave this planet with me being the only person who can do it, and have nobody to hold my kids in these practices, nobody to hold, because I do this stuff inside of organizations, but it's really for the humans inside of the organizations. And I want us to just live in a society where the skills of no upset, just, I'm not going to create stress or drama. I'm not going to add anything. We got enough stuff to deal with in life to have to add anything to it, or to be miscommunicating with each other, or to not be giving each other the kinds of acknowledgments that are important. So it's funny, because I'm realizing now I have to do a teacher training. I have to actually take this next step and go, I need to make sure there are other people who can do this, so that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, the work doesn't end. And so he passed, and he was also sort of a business mentor. He was not, he was a contractor for me, but he was also a mentor. And we lived, I don't know if I'm in the house that he built right now, and he lived in a house that was about 20 yards from here. So we saw each other all day, in and out every day. And I had to decide whether or not I was going to pull this organization together, and I didn't know who to look to, because he was my business mentor. At the moment. We had a friend who ran a big company, diversity training company nearby. Lovely man. I've known him for a very long time. And I thought, okay, well, maybe he'll know what to do. And I called him up and I said, Howard, can you, I need help. I need help. Like, what do I do? I'm drowning in bills. I don't know what to do with this. I might lose my house. I really don't know where to go. And he was love him. He looked at me and he said, I know that you have business stuff you want to deal with right now. Because the other thing that happened in that was, I was the forward-facing piece of a business, right? And we have, not a huge following, but at least 3,000 to 5,000 people who, were coming to us for intimate services. And sometimes your acupuncturist is like the person that you invite to your wedding. Like
they hear everything.
They're at the birth of your children, right? We're like really intimately parts of people's lives. And he'd been teaching for a lot of, 50 years. So all of these graduate students who'd been through 3.5 years of school with him as a teacher and as a mentor. And so I was the forward-facing piece. So when my family got together and said, well, somebody should tell people not to come out here for Memorial yet. And I was like, you mean me, right? Like, that's me. So within 24 hours of his death, I had to post something on our public business page, right? These are the things, these sort of weird, intimate things that are so, I think I did a pretty good job, because the other thing about the immediacy of death is I was so present that it was beautiful in a way. And I'll tell you a little side story about when he was in the hospital. There was a praying mantis. One day we did we asked the whole community of our business community. We reached out, sent an email to everybody on our list and said, look, Bob's in the hospital. If you've got a minute at noon today and you want to send him some love, prayers, healing, whatever it is that you do, let's do that. Yeah. And so at that time when that was going on, praying mantis showed up on the windowsill of his hospital room. And he had a tube down his throat to breathe. And so fascinatingly, within an hour of that session, he woke up enough to figure out having a little conversation with the nurse, you know, by sign language, et cetera, and said, I'm going to have this thing out in 24 hours or less. And, you know, and 24 hours later, he had the tube taken out, like 24 hours to the nose. He had the tube taken out. And then he spent 3 weeks talking with us before he died. So he actually And the day that he died, I was there, my stepmother, my brother, and my mom. We were all there with him when he passed. And that night, I had driven my stepmother to the hospital, and I drove her back home because we live right next door to each other. And I drove her back home, and she goes to get out of the car, and I look at her door, and I was like, "Is that a praying mantis?" And on the door frame of their house was the biggest praying mantis, and it was like 1 inch from the doorbell. And I was like, "He's home. He came home." I can't remember why I was telling this part of the story, but it's so there's a lot of like beauty in all of the suffering. But I promised him on his deathbed that whatever was mine of his to teach, I would continue to do.
Yeah.
And so I was the forward-facing piece. So I continue to communicate with our community, with his community. And I went to our friend Howard, and I said, I don't know how to keep this going. If I close it down, my 2 mothers won't have a place to practice, and they'll have lost not only a partner, a lover, and a business partner, and a husband, but they also won't have any place to do acupuncture anymore either. And our community, who sent floods and floods of messages, wouldn't have a place to come either. So I thought, okay. I went to Howard, and he said, I love you. I know you have business issues. You need to go on a retreat. And I'd been hearing it in the back of my head. I need, you need, I kept thinking I need 3 days to myself because my children were very close with my dad. My dad was kind of a father figure to my husband as well. My mothers were both grieving. Everybody in my organization was grieving, right? So I didn't have anywhere to go and disappear for myself. And so I've been hearing myself say I need like 3 days. So I go to Howard, and I'm like, I'm 80 grand in debt. What do I do? And he's like, you got business issues, but there's this retreat coming up. It's next weekend. It's 3 days. I think you should go. I'll sponsor you. And as soon as he said it, I knew. I was like, great. So it's a lovely organization. It's called the Inner Journey. I went on that retreat, and the work was very deep, and I met people that I'm still in contact and actually doing some work with now. And I got to do a lot of meditation and a lot of crazy sort of hippie-fied, like breathing exercises to the part where you like go into some altered state, and it was wonderful. And without that, I don't think I would have been able to take those next steps, which were that I ended up closing the business. So I actually after that I joined Todd Herman's 90-day year because I didn't have somebody who could be a day-to-day mentor. And I knew my mothers were they're not business. They're wonderful practitioners, wonderful people, wonderful teachers, but not a business helper.
Yeah.
And I had staff meetings, and I said, who's on board? Here's our monthly net. Like, I can ensure we can bring in this much. How much can you guys count? Can I count on you guys for it? And nobody was fully in. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to do this by myself, I'm going to need some serious, like, whip this together structure. And I did that in that first 90 days. I tried a lot of things at first, and then I realized I was never going to get where I needed to go with it, that the margins were too low. I had really been incubating other people's acupuncture practices for a lot of years, and they were going off. So I sort of spawned 16 other acupuncture practices in the area, but not people who would stay. And so I closed it, and I lost my shirt, right? Money-wise, I lost my shirt on it. But what was really amazing was what I realized is that the services I was providing, I didn't need all of that overhead for. Right? I missed my staff. I missed having a community. I missed being in that brick and mortar space. But I was teaching leaders, right? 2 days a month. I could rent a space and do that.
Yeah.
I was really, my private acupuncture practice, I was only doing about 2 days a week anyway. So I found a space. I rented a space with one of the women who also, you know, got disbanded when we moved. And I set my moms up in new places, you know, and said, you know what, they've got to deal with change too. We've all got to deal with change. That's part of our skill set is life has changed, right? Everything changes, everything goes, there's nothing is static. And so, so fascinatingly enough, I went from this hugely high overhead, high expense, a lot of back end business stuff to do, a lot of, you know, just personal employee, customer satisfaction, right? There's a lot of stuff going on all the time there. To doing is what I had always loved to do, which was teaching and acupuncture, and dropped out almost everything else almost immediately. It took me a few months to clean it all up, right? Like the taxes and the lawyers and the whatever and the leases and yada, yada. I broke a lease in the midst of it too. But I went from having, you know, 80% overhead to having 15% overhead overnight.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was able to keep the money that I was making.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And so now I'm sort of in the next iteration, I'm doing more corporate work again. I almost let go of the courses I was teaching, and my students came to me and they said, we need you to keep doing this. You cannot leave. You cannot stop doing this. You're the only person who can do this for us. And we need it, and our world needs it. And so, so it took a couple months to shake it all out. Yeah. And then I kind of I started over, rebranded, started enrolling the courses again, rented out some spaces to do it in, and I started doing more corporate work again, going actually inside of companies and taking the trainings to them. And so now I'm sort of back in ramp up mode, but I get to do what I love to do. I have one assistant now who's in the Philippines, and she's freaking amazing. And I finally like gotten my rhythm again around, you know, all that back end stuff that I never wanted to do anyway. So I'm, you know, I got to, on Friday, I got to drop poop on a chalkboard and save a company out like $100,000 doing it, which sounds crazy, right? Like this is like, sometimes I can't believe my life. Like I rented out a room in a local university, and I had a 2-day workshop where I did an intensive, and I taught all 12 of the skill sets. I do this like Duggan method skill set. And it's kind of sociopuncture, if you will, right? I'm using the principles of acupuncture to work on the body of an organization. Sure. So I'm in the class, and I'm just drawing on my chalkboard, and I'm like, well, you know, like there's the pile of shit that's there, right? Oops, can I say that here? I don't know. Okay. Like there's like, you know, there's like, if there's a pile of shit, you got to clean it up. Right. Okay, that's fine. But most of what we've got going on that we're dealing with is, here's the pile of shit to clean up. Now I'm mad about the pile of shit. So that's like you're adding another layer of shit. I'm mad about the pile of shit. And then you draw another one because you're like, I'm mad at myself for being mad about the pile of shit. And now you got 3 piles of shit when really there was only 1 pile of shit to clean up in the first place. And this woman, she looked at me, she was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe it, but you are so freaking right. And she just didn't have the tools around communication inside the organization and a thing to help people get to how to not add the second and third piles. And so, yeah, so that's sort of it's a long story. I didn't let you talk at all.
No, and that's awesome. I love that because honestly, you took us through an entire journey, and you took us through something very emotional, and it's something that as business owners, it's a blessing and it's a curse, because as business owners and entrepreneurs, we're blessed that we're able to take time off and be there when things come up And we were at a conference a couple weeks ago, and Todd Herman was saying that the number one derailer of business was family illness and injury.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing about that is as the entrepreneur, when the buck stops with us, when we stop working, the bucks stop coming. Yeah. You know, so I mean, you kind of had an awful lot of stuff coming at you at one time because you had to deal with things going on with your father. You felt responsible for your mother's, and then you had a business that you were responsible for, and then you had your own family.
Yeah. So, yeah. And not to mention the other practitioners in our, right, the staff, the woman who was our main front desk staff had been working for our families for over 17 years. Yeah. You know, and the other acupuncturists, I hand selected every single one of them, and they all had to go through a year training with us. Yeah. You know, so everybody in there was like family. So it was so many layers of it. But I learned so much from that. Like, I still don't think I would trade it, even as difficult as it was. I wouldn't trade it at all. You know, I mean, it's one of those crazy pieces. Yeah. You know, because now I know I'll do like going in now to this next version of business. I'm so aware if I don't train other people to be able to do certain things and acculturate my clients to allowing them to do it. Right. Yeah. That is, so if I disappear, they're not like, oh, I don't want to study with her because she's not right. I have to create the culture in which they understand that the other people working are as good or better than me at what I'm doing. And I have to train the people to get to that space so that can continue without me. Yeah. Which was a big learning curve. I don't have an MBA. Like, I didn't go to business school.
Sure. Trial and error is honestly, I think, the entire trajectory of most of our businesses. Is we don't know what we don't know until we go and stub our toe and realize that we don't want to do it that way again. Right. And, you know, for you are building a business well beyond what the people that you're serving today. You're trying to build a business that's going to way outlive your entire family. And the methodologies and the culture and all of that continues. And as entrepreneurs, a lot of times, if we're looking to scale a 6 or a 7-figure business, that's not normally the first thing that we're thinking about is, oh, I want to make sure that there's something that is here well beyond me. We're thinking about, I want to make sure I've made enough money to be able to go on vacation with my family, you know? So
it's interesting that you bring that up, though, because that's been as sort of an intergenerational business in a certain way. My father had a motto of just give it away. He wanted everybody to have access to these skills. But what that means is that when he died, we didn't have enough money to have him insured inside the business. Yeah. You know, at first he did have a little bit of money, but he didn't have a lot of money. Like, it's not like he died and everybody got enough money to take care of all the things. Sure. You know, at first we thought my stepmother might lose her house too. Right. We all thought maybe everybody was going down with this. Oh. So it's one of those things, though, that I've had to learn is he was really good at building organizations and building social change. He did not have a commitment to making 6 or 7 figures to ensure that would be able to keep going on and on after us. And so that's been, like, for me, I feel like I'm the next generation that needs to decide to go, okay, well, 7 figures is important because I actually can't I can't run this acupuncture detox program in Baltimore City that's been in my family for 25 years. You know, I can't do that if I don't have enough money to pay myself for that half day or whatever a week it is that I'm volunteering. So, so it's interesting because now I'm having to do the opposite. And you said most entrepreneurs are thinking about how do I make enough money so that happens. I started with a mission and had to figure out, and now I've had to figure out like how to make enough money to make it. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've known each other at this point for probably a little over a year, and we were just in San Diego, and I told you that I had done a recent conference and training. And as we were talking, you were dropping so many crazy value bombs on me about kind of your philosophy on life and how we show up in the world and trying and, you know, all of the things that we kind of have playing in our head day in and day out, but they're not real. And you were talking about the piles, and I'm going to say the piles of poop, you know, that they're one on top of another, but really the only pile of poop that's really there is the first one. The rest are things that we've now put in our head or we've amplified into something else. Tell us kind of about that and how you bring yourself into the business world, into corporate culture, because that I think is a gift that you have that I don't know too many people that have it.
So you want to know how I actually do it, or do you want to know like how do I think about it?
However you want to show up. If a listener was telling you, Jade, I've had a really bad week. I was telling you, I've had some stuff that has kind of happened this week, you know, and all the stuff that we start internalizing. And like, as soon as I got the phone message that we had an issue from our attorney.
So pause right there. Yeah. As soon as you got the phone message, what happened in your body?
All of a sudden, my blood pressure started to rise. I thought I was going to vomit. Yeah. I look at my husband and I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And, you know, all of those things start to happen and you don't know how to deal with it. Yeah. So right there, that's familiar. Every human being has an experience of this. So there are a couple of things that I like to go back and then pull apart and go, so, right, you got a call, you have like this weird little like light box. You've got this, this square thing and it made a noise and you looked at it and then you heard a sound. So one of the first things is, can I pull apart what's actually happening? Right? Because you were fine. You were standing there. Nobody actually hit you. Yeah. Right? You didn't get run over by a truck. You got run over by a telephone, actually, you know, in a certain way. Yeah. And did you know you had a choice to create all that tension in your body or not? So my first reaction is always the tension. And my husband always says to me, you immediately go to worst case scenario, and worst case scenario does not happen 99% of the time. Yeah. So, and you know, we're wired this way. So it's good to know when danger is coming, right? It's good to be able to have that reaction. The difficulty is if we do it over telephone calls, we may not have any of that left if a tiger finally comes to actually eat us. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the question that I'm asking. The second one is, like, feeling nauseous and ready to throw up probably doesn't make the lawyer, right? Doesn't fix the problem that the lawyer called you about in the first place. No. Right. Absolutely not. So, right. So that's the second piece, is to go, oh, wait a second. And then the third one is to say, did you have a practice in place that morning of setting, I don't know, a mood or taking some slow breaths or something, so that you never ever answer your telephone until you've taken one long, slow breath, so that you don't go reactive. It doesn't matter what's happening on the other end of the phone. You don't need to create that kind of reactivity, because what happens is, worst case scenario is one way to go looking at things, but guaranteed there are at least 6 or 7 either worst case scenarios and or ways to solve an issue. Mm-hmm. Most of which you can't really be creative about when your shoulders are tight and you're ready to throw up, because then you're just focused on, right, fight, flight, freeze. That's all that's going on. Yeah. So, so from my perspective, I always like to work with people who are not fully in crisis yet, mm-hmm. because then they can just pick a skill, and I just usually give one thing. Yeah. So depending on what's going on, right, it could be for you personally right now, I would say, you know what, you got to wear something on your hands or wrists. You wear a bracelet or a watch or something every day? Yeah, watch every day. Okay, switch your watch to the wrong wrist. And this is, some people will call this like a pattern interrupt. Okay. And so you're going to see that watch, and it's going to kind of disrupt your usual thinking at least 15 times a day. Okay. I don't know if I can get it on the wrong wrist. I know. So that, right? A couple of pattern interrupts here.
So once you get it on, you, when you see it, just take one long, slow breath. You can do that no matter where you are. It's going to turn off of that adrenaline response. If you're already in full-blown panic mode, this won't necessarily work. You might have to, run around the block, use up that energy, right? Do something, shout, scream, shake, whatever. In which case, however, here's why it's really important, because when you're running an organization and if you still have that tension in your body, because that's a phone call, you can't necessarily do a whole lot with it right now. How long do you keep that, right? How quickly can you let that go? How can you not do it in the first place? But then also, how quickly can you let it go? Because if you got on this phone call with me and you were feeling still tense, right, and kind of nauseous, we're going to have a completely different conversation. We're not going to be able to get to what's juicy about life or solve whatever's next in the, planetary issues that we're dealing with or whatever. And people, we're animals too. So when one person feels tense or fearful or whatever, you can say that people don't notice because you do a good job on the outside. It's just not true. Right? You've been in a classroom or some place where a boss walks in the room and they're tight and they're tense.
So, I think that is such a huge thing, because what you said, you asked me first if I had a practice that morning. And the funny thing is that I have instituted in my day, daily meditation first thing in the morning, but the call came in and then it was a message. And so I was waiting for the attorney to call me back. And so I skipped my meditation. I skipped my workout. I skipped all of the things that were like my time, my self-care, in anticipation of having to deal with this. And then my husband got home and I told him all about it. And I'm like, must have margaritas, and so,
so classic. It's so classic though. It's such a common, but it's such a human thing where you go from something happens, interrupts what you normally would do to tend yourself, and then, leads all the way down the road to where, like, I need a drink, and that's really common. It's really common, and we all have it. And the other thing that I'm aware of is, because we don't have these practices so ingrained, like, I don't care what's going on, you're going to remember to brush your teeth in the morning. Yeah. Right? Like, you're not leaving the house. Yeah. You're not going to leave the house until you've brushed your teeth. But we don't have the same hygiene around our emotional selves. Mm-hmm. We don't have the habit of saying, I don't care if you don't have to sit in meditation for 25 minutes. I want your whole life to be part of that meditation, so that no matter what's going on, as soon as you get this call and as soon as you notice this tension in your body, you go, I'm going to take a breath, or I'm going to remember what my mood was for the day. And when I say mood, I don't think about, some people say like set an intention, but to me there's an activity to that doesn't allow for the fact that, it's okay to feel crappy when something hits the fan. I just want to know, do I still have a way to hold it all? Like, is there some place, and is my body knows, okay, you know what, I'm going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm not going to be okay, like even if I'm going to die, like, am I going to be okay? I can be okay and be dying at the same time. We all are anyway, in a certain way. Yeah. So did you get your margarita, and do you feel better now?
So I did get my two margaritas. I drank an awful lot of calories that I didn't really need or want. And it didn't make the problem go away. But,
did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy it a little bit though?
A little bit.
Because for me, it's not about whether or not it's like, there's no good and bad here. Right. We all have our ways of dealing with stuff. Sure. And if it's margarita, or if it's cheesecake, or even if it's just enjoying the drama, right? Like, I like being tense. I like being mad. I want to enjoy it. Have fun with it. Just be careful who you spill it on. That's all.
Oh my goodness. And it's funny that you say that, because actually, now that I think about it, I've had an ongoing issue with Amazon and some fraud in our account. And so I picked up the phone and I just reamed them up one end and down the other. And now that you're saying that, it probably was a case of I had all of this like internal anger and rage that I just needed to let it loose on someone, and it didn't need to be my poor husband.
Yeah. And here's where, for me, this is like the ripple effect of, like, this is the social change piece of it. And I want to say this without having you have to feel bad about it, because we all have done this.
Of course.
But what's true is, who knows about whoever was on the other end of the phone at Amazon. Yeah. They go home and they've had, like, they were like, I got shit on, and now I've had a bad day too, right? So you've had a bad day, the Amazon person's had a bad day, and now the Amazon person's kids are having a bad day too, right? And then they're going to go to school and bully somebody else. Well, like, who actually punched that other kid?
Right.
Right? So this is, for me, why I will sometimes say, like, you might be a grown-up. However, we still sometimes need to, like, time out. And ideally not a timeout where we actually have to go hide in a closet for 10 minutes, where we can actually just go, I just need 3 breaths. I'm going to breathe while I'm talking and realize that my upset about this isn't going to change the world for the better in any useful way. And doesn't feel good in me to keep carrying it around either.
Yeah. I love you. I will tell you.
I love you too.
I'm so thrilled that you were my person this morning, because I will say that as I was laying in bed last night, I was thinking, how do I not let this destroy my day tomorrow? Because internally we continue to carry this stuff until we get it resolved.
So I would recommend that you use the word I, because I don't.
Okay.
Right. I have a practice. I am committed, for the sake of my children, for the sake of the people you work with.
Yeah.
I'm committed to not doing it that way.
I love it.
So
I need to take complete responsibility for my reaction to something.
Yeah. So what did you say? How do we not take this into tomorrow? What did you decide? How did you do it?
So basically, I just laid in bed and I prayed about it. And I'm like, okay, I have a big day tomorrow. I'm looking forward to a lot of the things that are on my calendar. I can't control this right now.
Right.
The situation that I was notified about really at this moment has very little to do with me. It just is a case of we're kind of being pulled into something else. Mm-hmm. And as such, it was a genuine decision that, okay, yesterday I let it derail my entire day. And today I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to dust myself off. First things I did, got up, I did my shower, I did my meditation, I did my journaling, I did all of the self-care things that all of a sudden make my day better.
Yeah.
So
you reset yourself.
Yes.
And so that's the amazing thing. We all have practices to reset ourselves around these things. Yeah. And we just don't always know that we have them, or we think that they have to take time, when really it just takes the decision to reset. Because
that is
upset never changes anything. Never changes anything except for how I feel in my own body.
Wow.
And 70% of our healthcare budget is in stress-related illness. So if you own a business, you cannot afford to do this.
Wow. If our listeners did not get anything else out of our conversation, that one thing I think is so hugely valuable, that upset doesn't change anything. And it's really how we react to it and how we show up after or during.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, Jade, we have just a couple minutes. Where can our people find you? What do you have going on, and where can they find you?
Gotcha. So I am always on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I'm Jade Duggan on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And I have workshops in the DC, Maryland area that I do. I have an online course that I teach, and I go into larger organizations. So if your organization has, over 20, 25 employees at least, if it's smaller, if you're really committed to culture change and you have 10 employees, we'll consider it. But I can probably do as much work on the phone with you that way. But I do bigger companies. I like to see the impact across a large stream of employees. And I do half or full day trainings inside of those companies as well.
Awesome. Well, those are hugely valuable. We will make sure that we link everything in the show notes. But I just want to say,
and if somebody wants to hop on a call to find out if it's a good fit or which one of the programs might be a good fit, I'll have you drop a link for that too.
Perfect.
Okay? Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really enjoying it. It is genuinely one of my favorite things I do all week long, is to get on the phone or to get on Zoom with really cool girls that are changing the world.
Yeah. And I'm in the Lemons to Lemonade theme. There's a book called Anti-Fragile.
Okay.
And it's about things that actually respond to stress in a positive way. So it's actually, you take it and you transform it into something bigger and better than it would have been otherwise. And I think that that's really what you're doing here, is seeing how our suffering creates some change for the better in a lot of ways.
Well, we will make sure we look that up and include that in the show notes too.
All right.
So thank you.
Good to see you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
In today's episode, we talked about masterminds and mentors. So if you would like our free checklist on questions to ask before joining a mastermind, please go to the show notes at lemonadepodcast.com.
Thank you for listening to Turning Lemons into Lemonade, where women go for support and encouragement to hear how other women business owners turn their setbacks into successes to create 6- and 7-figure businesses. We look forward to seeing you next week.